Hello, everyone, and welcome to a live edition of the Trish Regan Show, where we get some breaking news that is once again not looking good for the Biden administration. I got to tell you, is feeling, shall we say, darn right Orwellian. I mean, that's really the extent of the news we've got to share. One really highlights once again the administration's willingness to violate our First Amendment rights. The other, well, we don't know. The CIA is denying this, but the House Oversight Committee is out with just a bombshell allegation that we're going to get into surrounding whether or not the virus originated out of Wuhan, China, and whether or not the CIA had a certain bias in all that and may have paid people to project that bias. Now, the CIA says, no, I don't want to give the whole story away, but we got to get into this. Plus, I got a little clip I want to show you of Mike Lindell getting a little annoyed with lawyers. If you've ever dealt with lawyers, I'm sure you feel his pain. Welcome again to the program, everyone. We are brought to you in part by LegacyPMInvestments.com, LegacyPMInvestments.com, 1-866-589-0560. I'll tell you, you know what? Inflation, folks, inflation off the charts. We're going to get into that too, because they're lying to us on that. It's up 3.7%. Numbers don't lie, but administration officials do. Wait till you see how Biden's trying to spin it. It's kind of entertaining. You know, economic news sometimes can be a little boring. I mean, I find it exciting, but some people are like, oh, you know, I'm really not into it. Well, let me tell you, you will be when you hear what the Biden team is trying to tell you about our economy. But before we get to this, I want to start first here with a CNN report. This was reported late last night that the White House was sending a letter out to news executives today, urging them to ramp up scrutiny of the GOP's Biden impeachment inquiry, saying it's all based on lies. So here's the problem with that. You see, when the administration goes out and about and tries to tell news organizations like Fox, like Newsmax, like CNN, imagine that, even CNN, the New York Times has kind of been turning on the administration lately. You know, they're getting out of line. Well, then you've got the White House then trying to pull them back. The problem with that, however, is that it's a direct violation, you see, of this little thing we have called the First Amendment, which protects all of our ability to speak freely, openly. And certainly these news networks, not that they always do, but they ought to have the privilege, right? Now, apparently not according to Ian Sams. He's the special assistant to the president and senior advisor to the White House counsel's office. He's the one that penned this letter that Oliver Darcy got a hold of there at CNN. You see, they're very upset. They're very upset because the Speaker of the House has just launched this impeachment inquiry, and he's come forward with a bunch of documentation. Documentation, by the way, this is not like made up. They've been able to trace $20 million. You've seen some of the account records. I'll pull it for you. But this is public information at this point. Treasury Department has turned this over, including the 170 suspicious activity reports that were reported. We know that the kid, not a kid, but Hunter Biden was willing to testify to his tax evasion to the sum of $2+ million. He just didn't bother paying taxes in on all that money that he was collecting from overseas. Anyway, none of this is really made up. It's not like it's coming out of thin air like that dossier did. Thank you very much. Anyway, here is the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, and this is what the White House does not want us to talk about or to report on. So watch it. Enjoy it while you can.
Eyewitnesses have testified that the president joined on multiple phone calls and had multiple interactions. Dinners resulted in cars and millions of dollars into his son's and his son's business partners. We know that bank records show that nearly $20 million in payments
We've seen it.
were directed to the Biden family members and associates through various shell companies. The Treasury Department alone has more than 150 transactions involving the Biden family and other business associates that were flagged as suspicious activity by U.S. banks. Yeah.
In other words, there's a lot of stuff. Let's go through. Oh, look at that. Burisma Holdings, that would be that Ukrainian energy company, spending all that money on Rosemont, Seneca, Bohai. Well, I see some of those $83,000 payments, because who gets an $83,000 a month board job, right? Unless you're doing something for someone that's kind of extra special. Well, you see, the administration doesn't want us talking about any of this. And I'm in jeopardy, frankly, for even doing so. Quick reminder to make sure you hit the subscribe button. It's actually really important right now. Hit the subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell as well. Because if Ian Sams gets his way, we're not going to be talking about this. This is just misinformation, you see. This is their go-to line. Listen here to Mr. Ian Sams speaking with one of my former colleagues, actually over at Bloomberg, Phil Mattingly. Talented reporter. In this interview here, Ian Sams is talking gibberish. We know the letter's coming, right? But anyway, he goes on with Phil here and tries to say that this is all just normal, totally normal, that the president would call his son multiple times a day. Like, you know, I'm lucky, and I adore my mother. I'm lucky if I talk to her every single day. Anyway, here we go.
Well, again, I think this is part of the right wing's misinformation machine to try to confuse people about what the truth is. The truth is that the president, as he has said publicly for years, calls his family every day to check in. He calls his son every day to check in. He calls his other family members to check in to see how they're doing. He loves them. They're a tight-knit family. And what the GOP's own witness testified in this case is that that's exactly what the president was doing. He was checking in with Hunter during a particularly hard time, I might add, a time where the family was going through Hunter's brother Beau's illness. And of course the president checks in with his son and talks to him. But again,
of course he does, right? You know, he just wants to make sure that drug addict is doing okay. Forgive me. But he was discharged from the military because of cocaine. He did actually quite nearly admit to, until the plea deal fell apart, thank goodness, that gun issue, you see, because he was buying drugs and buying a gun, and that's not allowed. So there's a few of those little situations. Then, of course, there's that little doozy of those illicit substances, cocaine, being found in the White House while Hunter was there vacationing with his family right after he struck that little sweetheart plea deal that all fell apart. Anyway, the point is, 1, they've lied to us before. 2, they've tried to keep us from learning certain information before. I'm going to get to the current case that's actually just been in the appellate court. It's probably going all the way to the Supreme Court because they tried to squash information. They've been doing this ever since they got into the White House, even before they got into the White House. Thank you very much. Remember the 51 spooks that came out and said, no, nothing to see here with this Hunter Biden laptop. That's nothing but a bunch of Rudy Giuliani Russian misinformation, except it wasn't. All right, so now they're once again saying you can't listen to Trish Regan because this is misinformation, even though Trish Regan is sitting here pouring through the bank records, going through the House committees, oversight committees, bank records that they've gotten, looking through those 170 suspicious activity reports that were filed by 6 major U.S. banks, including JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America. I mean, this stuff is not made up, guys, unlike, again, that dossier that was actually just opposition research bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton's team. Okay? Like, this is real. Nobody went looking for this. The IRS found this because, do I even have to say, Hunter Biden somehow was connected to some international amateur PORN ring. And so consequently, yeah, they found him. And then they found all the tax evasion. And let me also remind you, he had somehow given up his whole lobbying career back when his dad first became vice president, or so he said, so he told us. I mean, that's when they opened up all those bank accounts, right? But by 2014, he was back in business, clearly, there at Burisma Holdings. So, no, Mr. Ian Sams, this is not misinformation here. These are cold, hard facts. These are numbers that are printed by banks. These are suspicious activity reports that the U.S. Treasury Department has. The House has every reason to launch an impeachment inquiry under these circumstances. Every reason in the world, because, yes, it has been said by the people involved that they were selling one thing, and that thing they were selling was the Biden brand. It's been admitted to by the LA Times and the New York Times that, in fact, this is apparently common practice. Who knew? I didn't know that Eastern European countries will often hire, they say, family members that are close to the administration, or even celebrities that are close to the administration to help ensure a little bit of protection. Excuse me? I mean, is that why Ava Longoria is hanging around the White House so much? Huh. Maybe. Maybe she's got some big international deals. You got me. But I would say this. The media has every right to be reporting on this. Let me go through some excerpts, if you would, from this letter. Again, this news coming to us originally from Oliver Darcy over at CNN, who somehow got a copy of this letter. And Mr. Sams wrote, "It's time for the media to ramp up its scrutiny of House Republicans for opening an impeachment inquiry based on lies." Really? Says who? Says you. Okay, says you. And I guess that's the final be all end all. I hope not. Again, subscribe. You got to hear the truth here. And I'm a straight shooter. It's not like Biden got into office and I was like, gosh, we need to impeach the guy because he's too old or he's not smart enough or his economic policy stinks. No. And I've sat on this story and I've watched this story because I don't want to be wrong. But I will tell you, we're looking at something pretty darn fishy. And if nothing else, we should have the peace of mind of knowing that the president of the United States is not somehow involved and that he wasn't selling his office, so to speak, while he was vice president. I mean, Obama issued a lobbying ban for family members, and yet Hunter Biden never abided by it. Not only did he not abide by it, he actually had the audacity to not even bother to register as a foreign agent. I mean, illegal in and of itself. And so, yes, we need to ask this question. It's not based on lies. It's based on information that is readily available now, thanks to FOIA requests, thanks to pressure from Republicans saying, hey, Treasury Department, you got to give us this information. Thank goodness some people are actually willing to stand up and say, we want to know what's what. Anyway, he went on, Mr. Sams, saying that the impeachment inquiry should, quote, set off alarm bells for news organizations. In other words, news organizations should be worried because you're trafficking in misinformation. How dare you? You did that, didn't you, during 2020? New York Post, you printed all that information from that Hunter Biden laptop. You were guilty of misinformation. And so what happened? Oh, Team Biden went over and talked to all the people that you were publishing this content with and said, don't you dare, it's misinformation. This is all coming to light. Unbelievable, really and truly. Just, it's not okay. In other words, the White House cannot be trying to influence the media coverage other than to say, their spin on things. I get it. They want to have their little day in the sun. And we'll get to that in a moment because they're certainly trying to spin the economy in bizarre ways, like bizarre, totally upside down ways. And we can discuss. But keep in mind that this is actually really problematic because when they're out there on the limb trying to suppress the media, trying to suppress individuals, trying to suppress thought, it's sunny out and they say it's raining or it's raining and vice versa. When they do that, they lose the trust of the American people. And that's indeed what's happening. So yes, Ian Sams, you know what? You want to go on CNN. You want to talk your book. Let's watch it again. Fine. But you know what? Don't tell me as a journalist what I can or cannot report. I will decide what is misinformation and what is not. Thank you, based on my own reporting.
Well, again, I think this is part of the right wing's misinformation machine to try to confuse people about what the truth is. The truth is that the president, as he has said publicly for years, calls his family every day to check in. He calls his son every day to check in. He calls his other family members to check in to see how they're doing. He loves them. They're a tight-knit family.
Yay, yeah, they're so tight-knit, Anyway, unbelievable. It comes on the heels of the Biden administration getting in a whole lot of trouble because, as I mentioned, they were really trying to orchestrate what could be said, what couldn't be said from the get-go, right? As soon as they came into office, it's like, we want this, we don't want that. And so they were trying to dictate to a lot of big tech players what could and could not be seen. And so now that case is actually at the Fifth Circuit Appeals Court, which did rule that, in fact, the White House was way out of line. The White House was overstepping the First Amendment on social media. That has been reported at length in the New York Times. And yet these guys can't take a hint. They just keep going further and further and further. You know, for as much as they went on about Trump trying to control the media, at least he did it to their face, right? He just sat there and said, basically, I hate you all. And this team is going behind our back, sending letters to our bosses, sending letters, and no boss for me, thank you very much, right? Just us here. It's a very freeing thing. But sending letters to journalist bosses and sending letters to tech companies, etc., trying to effectively threaten them. That's how I see it. Like, this is not okay. We are a free press, or at least we should be, right? That's sort of like one of our calling cards here in America. But, you know, more and more and more information keeps going out. Let me share with you, for example, this New York Times story. And I think it's really, really upsetting the Biden administration. Again, it's all about Hunter Biden and his dad. In fact, there's a whole section in this piece that came out this week that talks about how President Biden tries very hard to keep his son close. They're talking about that closeness, and actually they cite this one quote that comes directly from Hunter Biden himself, in which he says, quote, "I'm like his security blanket." This is what he told the New Yorker back in 2019. "I don't tell the staff what to do. I'm not there giving directions or orders. I shake everybody's hands, and then I tell him to close his eyes on the bus. I can say things to him that nobody else can." Gosh darn it, sounds like a marketing commercial for his lobbying business. Does it not? I mean, can't you just see Hunter Biden going into one of those meetings there in Ukraine and saying, "I tell him to close his eyes on the bus, and that's when I take the moment to tell him what nobody else can." It's my sweet pillow talk. Come on. All right, so this is all coming out. So you can imagine that, yes, people are saying, okay, he's got this really cozy relationship with his dad, and he brags about, because why wouldn't he? That was his calling card and his way to get $83,000 a month for a silly board job. Anyway, it goes on in this article to talk about how close, in fact, they are. That, you know, Hunter Biden was over there in Ireland just recently with his dad. He got to fly on Air Force One. He is, quote, per the Times, an informal advisor who helped his father brainstorm speeches. Wow. Okay, so he's brainstorming speeches. He's telling them stuff that nobody else can. The aides are getting kind of annoyed, according to the New York Times. And this is a former drug addict. Oh, we don't know the current situation. I shouldn't say former. Who knows? We know he did have his issues, did he not? Along with some other things as well. But anyway, he's somebody who certainly is not necessarily of the utmost standing character, not as I would say, a quality individual between the drugs and the other stuff. We'll just leave it at that. Anyway, so he's the guy who's talking to his dad constantly and is the only one who can really get through to his dad. Well, this does not look good. Does not look good. Not look good at all. And this is why Ian Sams and everyone at the White House are freaking out. And right now they're going to go into this sort of threatening mode where they tell everybody, you can't report on this. You can't report on this. You can't report. I will always report on it. Remember, like I have no filter. You know, it gets me in trouble. What can I say? But I will tell you exactly what I think. I have the filter in the sense that I'm not going to give you something that I think is bogus. All right. Like I have to triple check everything. It has to be something that I trust. I'm not going to go with bogus stuff. All that said, the public is now in a position where they don't quite know what to think about this administration or anything that they're told. And it's in part because, well, over and over and over again. They just keep lying to us. And now you have the House Oversight Committee looking into the CIA. What role, the question is, did the CIA play, if any, these are just allegations to be very clear, in how the United States packaged the whole idea of the coronavirus and its origins? Remember when you couldn't say like it came from Wuhan? I don't even know if I can still say that now. I think they changed the rules here. But again, subscribe because we're not sure. Hit the bell. We're not sure. I think they changed the rules. But anyway, there's a lot of information, as you may or may not know, that suggests we were helping to fund in a rather sort of roundabout way that Wuhan lab. And I question why we'd ever give them so much as a penny, given that there were already reports about their lack of safety, their lack of security. They had made the news actually in their own country. They were very proud of that bat lady, and they did some kind of special on her, which was later broadcast by the Taiwanese news station, and I saw it, showing how they didn't really care about some of those safety standards. I mean, they didn't say it in so many words, but they showed all these people in that lab with none of the safety equipment on. So that would have been like, red flag number one to me, like maybe we shouldn't be sending money to this thing. Anyway, somehow nobody wanted this to come out, that we had any involvement whatsoever with that particular lab. And they also, very importantly, didn't want it to come out. I don't know, maybe they're afraid of World War III or something, that this virus originated in this particular lab. If you'll recall, one of the things that people just went nuts on was when Donald Trump was like, yeah, I've heard intelligence that suggests it might have come from there. I mean, we don't know. We're looking at everything. But just the fact that he said that, everybody went nuts. Nature Journal ran a big thing the next day. Certain people got grants, etc. as a result of that. Well, now you have whistleblowers coming forward here saying, and this is in Science Magazine now, that the CIA bribed its own COVID-19 origin team to reject lab leak theory. This is according to two anonymous whistleblower claims. And so now there's this testimony you see from the CIA whistleblower alleging new information on this COVID origins. And this is coming forward to the House Oversight Committee. And they're writing that according to the whistleblower, at the end of its review, 6 of the 7 members of the team believed the intelligence and science were sufficient to make a low confidence assessment that COVID-19 originated from a laboratory in Wuhan, China. The 7th member of the team, who also happened to be the most senior, was the lone officer to believe COVID-19 originated through zoonosis. The whistleblower further contends that to come to the eventual public determination of uncertainty, the other 6 members were given a significant monetary incentive to change their position. Wow. Okay. That's a big accusation. Remember how like different teams had different views on where the Wuhan virus really originated. Forgive me, the coronavirus, whether it came from Wuhan or someplace else, and they're sort of undecided. And so what these people are now alleging is that there was money exchanged. And in order to get people to change their tune and say, well, maybe it didn't really come from here, that they were paid this significant amount of money. The CIA is vehemently denying this. I will put that out there. They are saying absolutely no way, Jose, just like, by the way, the White House is saying absolutely no way, Jose, did Joe Biden have anything to do with his son's business. Okay, so that's their side. But we ought to be able to report this other side. I mean, you do have whistleblowers making these allegations now about the CIA, and these are pretty alarming comments. I mean, look, a governor of our overall GDP, which is not going to be so good, if Biden stays in office much longer. I want to show you because, guys, and I see a couple of you mentioning this here, these economic numbers are just really bad, like really, 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 really bad, because we just learned today that inflation has jumped another 3.7%. And the reason it's jumping is because of energy prices, We got news the other day that Biden, he's been like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. He finally decided he's not going to drill in the Arctic, and he's pulling away all those contracts. OPEC, meanwhile, it's been cutting production. So what do you think happens? Oil prices go up. And no, we don't have all those electric vehicles, and we don't have the whole grid built out for those electric vehicles. So what do you think is going to happen in the interim? Energy prices go up, people suffer, right? And yet somehow, despite this spike in energy prices, they want you to think otherwise. I mean, it's wild to me. Let me give you the numbers. So in August, CPI, Consumer Price Index, rose 3.7% from 12 months earlier. It was up from 3.2% in July. Yikes. Okay, so this is not good. And hey, great. It fell from 9.1% in June 2022. That was the highest it had been since 1981. But keep in mind, it was Mr. Joe Biden who came into office in January of 21, and then, somehow for the February 21, and then you got 9.1% on the Consumer Price Index, even higher, by the way, double digits on the producer prices. So, he can say it's coming down, but let's just keep in mind who it went up under. It is still higher. So inflation is still a problem. And the reason it's a problem, if you read the fine print, is because of gas prices. In fact, I'm going to quote from a CNBC article in which they write, gasoline prices jumped 10.6% in August alone, following a 0.2% increase in July. Gasoline cost $3.84 a gallon on average as of Tuesday, according to AAA. Gasoline was the largest contributor to inflation in the month of August, accounting for over half of that increase. And yet, what do we got here? We got this Jared Bernstein trying to tell us something else entirely. I'm going to get to it. But first, Mr. Paul Krugman, that wonderful elitist economist there at Princeton University, who is the most political hack of an economist I've ever met in my entire life, trying to tell us that actually there is no inflation. I mean, the guy must think we are morons. Here he is with that wonderful Christiane Amanpour.
The president and congressional Democrats are cutting energy costs by investing in clean energy and reducing our dependence on foreign countries that often don't share our values. And so I view the investment agenda that I talked about in my comments as very closely connected to this idea of transitioning to clean energy and more energy independence.